Every day after school, she didn't head to the stadium, the mall, or the park where kids her age gathered with Bluetooth speakers and sugary takeaway coffee. Instead, she took the crooked path that sloped down toward an old chapel by the woods, a place that hadn't been repaired in over 15 years. Moss-covered stone walls, a wooden door barely hanging on one rusty hinge, and cracks where the evening light slipped through. This was her refuge, Lada, a girl barely noticed in class. Not because she was an outcast, but because her voice was too quiet, and her gaze seemed to look through people into a space where no one needed to prove anything. She didn't know how to argue, didn't like noise, didn't take selfies, didn't wear eyeliner or branded clothes. No one bullied her, they just avoided her, as if she were part of the school's interior, as faded as the walls in the workshop room. But in the chapel, everything was different. Under the dome, where real choirs had once echoed, her voice came alive. It wasn't loud, number. It was like the wind, barely there, but reaching something deep in the soul. She sang old church melodies she'd heard from her grandmother as a child, hummed tunes of her own, sometimes with no words, just feelings living inside her. And when her voice touched the stone, it felt like the walls themselves breathed with her. She didn't know musical notes, had no formal training. She just felt, as if music lived within her, and only here, in this forgotten by God chapel that smelled of wax and time, could it find its way out. Once, a boy from a parallel class approached her. He'd heard her by accident, smirked, said, "What, you gonna become a nun or something?" and ran off laughing. She didn't answer, just kept singing. A few days later, three more came, with a speaker, blasting pop, heavy bass, loud laughter. They stood at the entrance, turned on a track, started dancing. One of them, tall, slicked back hair, pulled out his phone. "I'm filming this," he said. "Let the internet laugh, too." But then he froze, because even over the volume of their music, Lada kept singing, not louder in decibels, but deeper in feeling. Her voice didn't demand attention. It simply was. And there was something in it, something that made even stupid laughter sound hollow. They left, but one of them, the one with the phone, looked back. He didn't know why. He just uploaded a short clip, no editing, no caption, no hashtags, and forgot about it. Meanwhile, Lotta returned home as usual, set a cold cup of tea on the table, placed down her old recorder, the one she used to capture her singing, just to listen back and figure out if there was something real there, or if she was only imagining it. Her mom came home late, tired, muttered over her shoulder, "In that chapel again? You should hang out with the girls like normal kids." She didn't reply, just went to her room, sat by the window, and began to sing, softly, for herself, for the darkness beyond the glass, unaware that her voice had already started its journey, uninvited, unplanned, unbelievable. The video, posted on a whim, began to spread. First one like, then three, then a share. Someone commented, "I don't know why I'm crying, but this is beautiful." Another, "Feels like a voice from inside me." And while all that was happening, Lada slept, in her gray pajamas, on an old couch, beneath a threadbare blanket with reindeer, unaware that in the morning, her silence would be heard by the whole city. Her phone vibrated at 7 a.m., and that was already strange. It usually stayed quiet. Lada mostly used it as an alarm clock or a flashlight, but that morning the screen blinked with dozens of notifications. Someone from her class chat had dropped a link. Then another and another, everywhere the same video. She recognized herself instantly. That same old chapel, the cold light, the stone, the voice, quiet, stubborn, not meant for an audience. And yet, there it was. The video lasted 39 seconds. But that was enough. She watched herself from the outside and didn't understand why her heart pounded like she'd stolen something, why her chest filled with fear, as if someone had caught her doing something deeply personal, intimate, exposed. Because a voice isn't just sound, it's something born deep inside, where memories live, where emotions breathe, where all the things you never say with words hide. She went to school like usual, eyes down, hood pulled tight, walking fast. But the looks, she felt them. The same people who used to pass by or unnoticed now turned to stare. Some nodded, some smiled, some whispered, loudly on purpose. "That's her," someone muttered by the lockers. "The one with the voice." One older guy smirked and said, "Didn't know that's what they sing in nun school. Where's your next gig, the graveyard?" Someone giggled, but not everyone, that was new. Before they all laughed. Now, only a few. The rest stayed silent. Some looked at their phones, some looked at her, some looked away. But Lada walked past, didn't respond. She didn't know how, and really, what could she say when everything inside her was humming, like she was standing on the edge of something where there was no turning back? During the break, a girl from another class came up to her. She used to share a desk with Lada in primary school before being moved to another section. "I listened to your recording 3 times," she said softly. "I don't know how to explain it. It's like silence became a sound. Thank you." Then she left. No expectations, no selfie, no do it again, just thank you. Then a call came from the local newspaper. The editor, a woman with a raspy voice, said, "We'd love to do an interview. This is really special, Lada. You have a beautiful voice. Please think about it. This could be the start of something big." Lada thanked her, but didn't answer. She hung up and lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. For a long time, she didn't want an interview, didn't want to be a headline. She just wanted to sing, in the only place where no one interrupted her, where the applause was wind through the windows. But the video had already taken on a life of its own, independent. Following rules she didn't write. Bloggers reposted it. Singers commented. A musician with over 1 million followers wrote, "Who is this girl? I need to hear her live. There's something in her voice I haven't felt in years. A silence with a soul." And then the priest called. "Ladushka, I'm sorry to bother you. A TV crew wants to come film in the chapel. If you want, I'll say no. I'll tell them we've got renovations, a leak, anything. But if you want them there, they can come." She was silent. Then she said, "I don't know. I didn't sing for them." "Then sing for yourself. The rest will sort itself out." That same night she went to the chapel, alone. The wind was cold, but she felt warm inside. She entered, closed the door behind her, stood in the center, and began to sing. No phone, no camera, no requests, just like before. But outside, in the dark, people were already standing. They didn't call out, they didn't film, they just listened. Because for the first time in a long while, someone had reminded them, you don't have to be loud to be heard. The next day, after that video, the house was filled with a strange silence. But it wasn't the cozy silence of her chapel, not the earned, familiar kind. It was the kind where the air felt heavier. In the morning, her mother put on the kettle but forgot to turn it on. Lada sat by the window with her phone in hand, staring at the screen where new notifications appeared every minute. Strangers wrote to her as if they knew her. "You're incredible. Where can we hear you live? You belong on a big stage. Don't stop, girl." She didn't know how to feel about it. Until yesterday, no one ever mentioned her name unless necessary. She was just Lada, not the one who sings, not the one people talk about. And now, more people knew her name than she had ever seen in real life. And yet, almost none of them truly knew her voice. They knew a fragment, a snippet, a moment accidentally caught on video, but not why she sang, why that way, or who her music was meant for. And that was the whole point. Her phone vibrated all morning. Journalists, bloggers, radio hosts, TV producers, they all called, wrote, invited, offered. She didn't even have time to open all the messages, let alone reply. Her mother, in a bathrobe with a damp towel over her shoulders, stood at the doorway, bewildered. "I don't understand. This is all because of your voice." Lada nodded. "I just sang, like always." "But why now?" Her mom threw up her hands. "You've been singing since you were little, and now, just a video. That's it. Someone posted it, that's all. And do you want this?" She suddenly asked. "Do you want to be famous?" The question hung in the air. The word famous felt foreign, slippery, incompatible with the kind of notes Lada sang alone under the gray arches. I don't know, she answered honestly. I just want to sing. And in that moment, the phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Lada picked up. Good afternoon, said a smooth, well-trained voice. My name is Valery Anatolovich. I represent a major music agency. You're recording, well, I'm sure you're aware it's gone viral nationwide. We'd love to discuss a partnership. What exactly are you offering? Lada asked softly. Let's start with your image. You've got natural talent, but let's be honest, it needs packaging. You need a new name. Lada is too provincial. We thought, Leah, short, modern, and a new style. Our manager will help with wardrobe, makeup, hair, a bit of stage training, and believe me, you'll be a sensation. Lada was silent. Hello, are you there? Yes, I'm listening. It's just, I don't sing for the stage. I sing because I can't not sing. That's wonderful, the voice chuckled politely. And believe me, you'll be singing even more, just in the right format. None of those chants. You need hits, modern sound. What the audience responds to will make you a star. Thank you, I'll think about it, she said, and hung up. She sat for a long time, then got up, threw on her coat, and went to where it all began. The chapel was chilly and smelled of dust, icons, and silence. She stood in the center, closed her eyes, and sang, not as Leah, not for the millions, as Lada for herself. But even the chapel wasn't the same as before. On the bench near the entrance sat an elderly couple. Behind them, a boy around 11 holding a phone. They didn't look amused or amazed. They just listened. It wasn't the same listening as before. Now there was expectation in it, hope, and maybe danger. That evening, her mom came into her room and sat on the bed. So, what have you decided? They called again. Lada looked out the window. I don't want to be Leah, and I don't want to stage if it means changing who I am. If people hear my voice, let them hear it as it is, and if they don't, I'll still sing. Her mother was quiet, then said, if you stay true to yourself, I'll be proud of you, even if you sing for just one person. Lada hugged her, for the first time in a long while, just because. And meanwhile, message after message kept coming to her phone. But now she no longer feared not reading them. A name can become known before the voice, but only Lada decides what name stands behind that voice. The invitation came by post, a real one, with the city's emblem embossed in gold on creamy paper. We invite you to take part in the ceremonial concert, Voice of the Homeland, dedicated to Culture Day, signed by the deputy head of the Department for Youth and Spiritual Heritage. The wording was formal, almost bureaucratic. But Lada's mother beamed, as if the envelope read, your daughter is needed by the world. Lada stared at the text for a long time, then flipped the invitation over and read it again. There wasn't a single mention of her song, not a word about which piece she should perform, just, your presence will adorn our stage. Adorn, not perform, not open, not present, just be there. Like decoration. Her mother was ironing a dress, hurriedly hemming the old lining, stitching the edges with clumsy pride. You just need to be seen, just this once. It's the city concert, you understand? There'll be journalists, TV. You won't say no, will you? Lada didn't refuse, but inside, everything clenched. Not from fear, from falsehood. They didn't invite her out of respect. They invited her for appearances, to check a box. Local star, present. To say later, there she is, our heroine. But they didn't know Lada wasn't a heroine. She was just a girl with a voice that needed silence, not a spotlight. There was no rehearsal. The organizers didn't send a program, didn't explain the lineup. All they said was, you'll be in the third block, after the dance number, and before the veterans choir. Oh, and please, not that song. Pick something patriotic. Do you have a backing track? Lada said nothing, stood there with a folder in her hands, like a stranger at her own celebration. In the dressing room, the other performers chatted about who was going to which festival, who had the best media kit. Lada sat in the corner, silent. Not from fear, from understanding. This isn't my stage. The host came out, the anthem played. The first block began dances, poems, choreographed acts. Officials sat in the front row. The press filled the gallery. Everything was polished, calculated, proper. Backstage, someone ran with clipboards. Someone else whispered cues. And then a young woman from the organizing committee approached her. So, you don't have to go on. Just walk across the stage at the end with a bouquet. We'll say you performed before the concert started. It'll look good. People won't know the difference. Lada looked at her. I'm not going to walk, and I'm not going on stage. I'm sorry. But what do you mean? We were counting on you, the program, the guests. I'm not a checkbox, I'm a voice. And if the voice isn't allowed to be heard, let there be silence. And she left. Quietly, no yelling, no drama. She simply removed her mic, set it on the table, and walked out. In the hall, someone she knew spotted her in the aisle and waved, surprised. She didn't wave back, because she knew. The moment you agree to be someone's backdrop, they'll decorate their stages with you forever, and she didn't want to be anyone's decoration. That night, she returned to the chapel, but not alone. They were waiting for her. Not journalists, not producers, people. Those who had found her not through a flyer, but through their hearts. They stood quietly, entered one by one. No lights, no flashes. She stepped to the center and began to sing what they told her not to, what demanded to be released, what lived between the words. No one clapped, no one took photos. But in that moment, she knew, this is my stage, no spotlights, no tickets, a stage where people listen, not because it's trendy, but because they can't not listen. They came without warning, no cameras, no long letters, no promises or contracts. They simply appeared at the chapel, approached quietly, took off their hats, and sat on the benches. Someone brought a thermos of tea, someone else, a blanket for another girl shivering from the February wind. One middle-aged man with soft eyes said, I heard you online. But live, it's different. In person, it's like you're healing. I didn't even know I needed this. Lada just nodded. She had hardly spoken in recent days. She only sang. Every song, not as a performance, but as a confession. For each person who came. And every evening, someone would stay behind, after her singing, sitting in the empty chapel, just to be silent. As if Lada's voice opened up a space inside people where they didn't need to hurry, didn't need to impress, didn't need to be someone. They could just be. One evening was especially strange. Snow had covered the path, and she thought no one would come. But in the dim light of the chapel, someone was already standing, a man, short, bearded, in a worn-out puffer jacket and large glasses. He held a voice recorder in his hands. When he saw Lada, he stood up from the bench. Sorry to show up like this, I've been meaning to. I'm Igor. I make podcasts about real music. Not radio, not stage. About voices. I heard you, and I had to come. She didn't answer right away. Just took off her hood, stepped closer. If you want, I can sing. He nodded. Only if it's for yourself, not for the recording. She smiled faintly. I always sing for myself. She began to sing. He didn't turn on his equipment. He just sat with his eyes closed. And in that song, with no words, no accompaniment, none of the things the industry usually says are necessary, he heard something studios don't have, silence with a soul. The next day, he wrote about her, not an article, not an ad, a letter, long, on his blog. I met a girl who doesn't want to become a star, and that's why she already shines. Her voice isn't on stage, not in rotation, not on billboards. It lives in the places where people are tired of fakery, where they sing not for fame, but because they simply can't not sing. The post went viral, but this time without noise. It wasn't drowned out with music. It was shared with words like read, listen, in silence. And then a woman came to Lada from Moscow, tall, in a gray coat, no makeup. She sat in the front row of the chapel. I'm a producer, but don't rush to say no. I'm not one of those who'll change your name or dress you in sequins. I'm one of those who want to stay out of your way just to give you a microphone and step aside. Lada looked at her for a long time. Why? Because there's too much noise right now and too little of this. She pointed at Lada, at the space around her, at the silence that didn't feel cold. I want to show you to people, but just as you are, in churches, in old theaters, no stage, just you and your voice, if you'll allow it, Lada thought. Only if it's not for promotion, only if it's not for sale, only if I can still be Lada. Exactly that, the woman said. Exactly you, exactly Lada. And in that moment, Lada realized maybe not everything in this world is against silence. Sometimes silence finds those who know how to protect it. The first evening was in a city that smelled of old trams, wet asphalt, and the bakery near the station. A cultural center on the outskirts with crumbling letters on the sign, yellow hallway lights, and chairs filled not with fans but with people. Just people. Someone came after a shift at the factory. Someone brought their grandmother who hadn't left the house in months. Someone held a child by the hand, headphones around their neck, eyes far too grown for their age. There was no stage, just a microphone at eye level and a stool by the wall. Lada stood as always, in a simple dress, no makeup, straight hair tied back with a plain band. Behind her, a piece of white sheet pinned to the wall instead of a banner. In the hall, half darkness, silence, and no announcements. She didn't say good evening, didn't introduce herself, just held the microphone with both hands as if it held a soul and began to sing. The first song, an old one, almost a prayer, no words, just a sound woven from air and inner strength. The second, with lyrics, about a home that no longer exists, about a childhood that smells of bread, icicles, and her mother's voice, about time, which passes yet leaves something inside. No one clapped in the hall. And that was the greatest recognition, because applause is often a habit. But silence, when you want to keep listening, that is respect. Afterward, a woman in a headscarf about 60 approached, holding her chest, and said, "Girl, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like something loosened inside me. I haven't sung to anyone in 40 years, and now I want to." A man holding an accordion, a former Philharmonic musician, gave her a sheet of music. Not because you read notes, but because you hear them, and that's worth more than any education. And so it was in every city. No advertising, just one post from her agent, the same woman from Moscow. Tonight, a small church in Novoselsk. Will start at 6. Entry is free. Silence is required. And people came, from homes where there hadn't been music in a long time, from streets where noise was the norm, from hospitals where one nurse would leave the door slightly open so the sound could reach even those who no longer believed in miracles. One day, a performance took place at a train station, unofficial. Someone simply said, "She's here. Can she sing?" They gave her a bench, turned off the speaker announcements. People set their suitcases at their feet and listened. Some cried, some prayed, some just sat. And Lada sang, softly, steadily, not to the crowd, but to the pain each person had brought with them. One railway worker, a huge man in uniform, said, afterward, "You know, girl, we've had all kinds of people come through here, artists, politicians, but you're the first one I actually believe." Her concerts weren't broadcast live. They didn't instantly go viral. But videos were shared through messengers, no filters, no logos, just as a message, listen to this, not a viral clip, but a personal echo. One day, she arrived in a village where the community hall hadn't worked in years. Just a school and a club room that smelled of lime and old magazines. There were 8 people, 3 children, 1 grandfather, 2 women, and a priest. She sang. And not once did she regret not being in a 1,000-seat venue, because afterward the grandfather came up and said, "You sang, and my heart stopped hurting. Honestly, I was sitting there and suddenly realized, I don't want to die, I want to hear you again tomorrow." And that evening, when Lada lay down in the guest room of the local library on an old couch under a blanket with birch trees printed on it, she thought, this is the stage she'd been choosing all along, the one with no lights, no noise, where there are no tickets, but people still come, because her voice didn't call people to a concert. It called them home, to a place where no one judges, where you can cry without explaining, where you can simply be. The journey home was quiet. The train moved slowly, as if it didn't want to rush. Outside the window, fields passed by, trees covered in frost, the occasional station. Lada sat by the window, wrapped in a knitted blanket gifted to her in Tula. A woman with a hoarse but kind voice had handed it to her, saying, "So the voice that warms hearts doesn't catch cold." Next to her slept her agent, the one who never tried to change her, just traveled beside her, always slightly behind, as if guarding her silence. She didn't know how her hometown would react. There were no posters, no one shouted, "The star returns." Her journey wasn't triumphant, it was human. She was simply going back to where it all began, back to where no one heard her, or even listened. Back then, the bus from the station dropped her off near the bakery. Everything was the same: the crooked sidewalk, the sign with peeling letters, the display window with long stale loaves. Only one thing was different. The shopkeeper came out from behind the counter as soon as Lada entered and said, "We've been waiting for you. Baked fresh bread for your arrival." She didn't know what to say. She just smiled, accepted the loaf, and continued walking down a street where once no one noticed her. Now, every second person nodded. Some waved, others just looked, long and directly, as if seeing her for the first time. Her mother stood by the entrance of their building, a kettle in her hands. "Water got shut off again, of course, but that's okay. I've been waiting for you for ages." She hugged her tightly, as if for the first time, or the last, or the way only mothers can, when the one returning isn't just a daughter, but someone the world tried to bend, and she withstood it. That evening, Lada went to the chapel. Of course, alone. She always did that before singing, not for people, for herself, for God, for the stone that had been listening long before she was born. But even at the gate, she saw silhouettes. They stood in the dim light, some with children, some with dogs, some holding thermoses. She didn't understand how. How did they know? Who told them? But they stood, silently, waiting. And when she entered the chapel, she saw that the benches were filled, the same ones once covered in cobwebs. Now they held people she recognized by their eyes, but never by their voices. A former classmate, the one who laughed with the speaker, sat by the wall, eyes lowered. The biology teacher, always dry and sharp, now held an open book in his hands, but wasn't reading, just covered his face with it. The boy from the senior class, the one who once said, "You sing like it's a funeral," sat in the last row. In his eyes, regret and fear all at once. Lada stepped to the center, said nothing, just looked at them all, and began to sing. This time there was no music, not even a microphone, just the same voice that had filled this space when no one was around. But now it wasn't alone. Now every sound echoed in someone. Every breath became a shared prayer. When the song ended, no one clapped, no one stood, no one spoke. But that silence was the loudest gratitude of her life. After the service, the priest approached her. "You know, child, once you sang and no one heard. Now you come, and even the walls turn toward you." She didn't know if such words could come from God, but from him they could. And he continued, "Because you weren't seeking to be heard, you simply kept speaking to the Creator, and people heard that too." Just later, she stepped out into the night. Snow fell softly onto her hood, and for the first time in a long while, she thought, even if everything disappears tomorrow, these people, this night, this breath of silence, will stay with me forever. They arrived in a black SUV with Moscow plates, expensive coats, folders, laptops, and business-like expressions. They didn't come to the chapel, the community center, or the school. They came straight to her building. They stepped out, glanced around at the 5-story block with peeling plaster, and one of them curled his lip. Interesting. How could such a pearl be born here? Lada watched them from the balcony. Her tea was growing cold in her hands. She already knew what was about to happen, because with every performance, every video where she sang without backing tracks or makeup, every person who cried in the hall, those who don't cry but calculate, kept getting closer. Half an hour later, they sat in her kitchen, at the table where just yesterday she'd sliced bread and written new lyrics in her notebook. One of the men, young, energetic, did most of the talking. "No, Lada, You have phenomenal potential, a unique format, and most importantly, you haven't been spoiled by show business yet. That's worth its weight in gold. We're not just offering a contract, we're offering a story. You'll become the symbol of a new sincerity. We already have ideas for the music video: chapel, light, fog, choir singers, you in a white dress under a starry sky. Arrangements, the best. Stylist, the best. We just need to tweak your style a bit, make the voice a little more accessible. We'll add some bass, remove the pauses, pick up the tempo. Understand, you're pure gold. We just need to polish it. Lada watched his lips move, rehearsed and precise. Words poured out like from a glossy brochure: unique product, investment in promotion, platform contracts, magazine covers. She stayed silent, no questions, no objections, just listened, not out of fear, but because silence had become her right. And every argument they made, loud and enthusiastic, hit a wall only they couldn't see. They spoke to her like she was an instrument, a possibility, a beautiful stone waiting to be carved into the desired shape. And at one point, Lotta stood up, slowly, not abruptly. She set her cup in the sink, turned to them, and said, "I don't sing so that millions can hear me. I sing so that maybe just one person can finally hear themselves." And she added, "I'm not a project, I'm a person." One of them smirked. "That sounds lovely, but lovely doesn't mean effective. Understand, girl." She raised her eyes, and he fell silent, not from fear, from shame. "I already made a choice," Lada continued, "to speak or to stay silent. I chose to speak, but now I have a different choice: to be silent when someone wants to take my voice away. And I choose silence, not as weakness, but as strength, because not every offer is an opportunity. Sometimes it's a trap." They packed up in silence, quickly, not offended, just unused to a simple girl from the provinces saying no, not with a scream, not with drama, just refusing to break. As they left, one of them said, "You'll regret this. This was your chance." She replied calmly, "Everything I sing is born of something that can't be sold, and what can be sold, I don't sing." When the door closed behind them, her mother came out of the room, a towel in her hands, worry on her lips. "Are you sure?" Lada hugged her. "Yes, Mama, because for the first time in all of this, I'm not afraid of silence." That night, she didn't go to the chapel. She stayed home, just sat on the floor by the window and opened an old notebook. The pages were wrinkled, the handwriting uneven. It held lines she wrote in fifth grade when no one listened. Lines from a time before fame, before views. Just her, and her voice, and the silence which had now become her ally. And Lada suddenly understood. Now she was silent not because she wasn't given a voice, but because her voice had already been heard. And it had been heard. It wasn't a tour, it wasn't a concert schedule, it wasn't a series of performances. She was simply being invited, not by contract, not for a fee, but from the heart. The letters didn't come as requests for performance, but as a few simple lines, written with a trembling hand, or on behalf of a sister, a daughter, a doctor. "My father is dying. He always listened to you. Could you come? My mother hasn't left her room, but when she hears your voice, she smiles. In our hospice, people are afraid of death, but you sing as if it's not scary." She read these lines and something happened inside her. Not fear, not pity, but a quiet understanding. This is the path. Not to the stage, but to the very heart of a person, where nothing can be faked, where there's no need to pretend anymore, where even breathing is real. The first invitation came from a hospice in the Pskov region, a small facility, long neglected. Old walls, linoleum worn down to concrete, and windows with curtains from another era. 4 people lay in the room, 2 women and 2 men. One had cancer, the other's kidneys had failed. One man breathed with oxygen, the other just lay there with closed eyes. But alive, everyone knew no one gets discharged from there. She arrived at noon, no instruments, no backing tracks, not even a notebook, just her voice. The nurse whispered, "Don't expect applause. No one claps here. Here, they either listen or say goodbye. She nodded, entered, didn't say hello, just looked at each of them, long and attentively, and began to sing, slowly, softly, almost in a whisper, a song no one knew, but everyone felt. And in that moment, when her voice filled the air between tubes, bandages, IVs, the room stopped smelling of pain. Only light remained. It poured from her voice, from the windows, from the breath that became steadier. After the performance, no one stood up. Only the woman in the corner, the one who hadn't left her bed in 3 weeks, suddenly said, "I had a son. He's gone. But just now I felt he was here. Not because I'm going crazy, but because your voice uncovered the silence that had always just been pain. And now that pain became memory. And I'm not afraid anymore." The next invitation came from a boarding school for children with hearing impairments. She didn't understand why they were inviting her. "They can't hear," she asked the woman who wrote the letter. "They don't hear like you, but they feel vibrations. We tried different songs, no response, but one boy put your recording under his pillow and slept for the first time in a week. Maybe he didn't hear it, but he felt it." She went, sang barefoot on a wooden floor in the hall, and the children sat, some with hands on the floor, some hugging their knees, some with eyes closed. They didn't clap, but afterward they came up to her, and without a word, they placed a hand on her chest, where the sound lives, as if to say, "I don't hear you, but I know you." After that, she started being invited to places where artists aren't usually invited, to shelters, to wards with the severely wounded, to homes where only radio and silence remain. No one made posters, no one asked for autographs, but everyone who invited her said the same thing. "Please come, just be with us." And she came, not with a costume, but with herself, not with a show, but with silence that knows how to speak. And one evening near the end of the year, someone approached her, gray-haired in glasses, with simple words. "I was at a stadium when a world-famous star performed. I've been in halls where the whole world stood, in theaters where artists were lifted on shoulders. But what you did when my brother, who was dying, asked me, turn on that girl, and fell asleep, that, that was real. No stage, no lights, just you and your voice." And that night, Lada understood that a voice people believe in doesn't need advertising. It simply exists. And people come to it without tickets, without programs, without titles. They just come to where people sing not for fame, but for the soul. The letter arrived in early spring, short, handwritten. "Hello, Lada. It's Irina Dmitrievna writing, your former homeroom teacher. Our school is celebrating its 50th anniversary. We've decided to invite those who once studied here and became someone. Naturally, everyone immediately thought of you. Would you like to perform?" Lada smiled, not out of irony, but from a strange feeling, as if a shadow of the past settled on her shoulders, not with cold, but with warmth. The school, the place where she was never invited on stage, where her voice was too quiet, where she was considered odd, where teachers whispered, "She's good, but somehow separate," where students judged not by talent, but by how well you fit in, where she left no loud traces, only a notebook forgotten in the library, and invisible songs in the hallways when no one was listening. And still, she agreed. On the appointed day, she arrived early, pulled up to the building that seemed unchanged, the same peeling facade, the same rusty-handled metal door, the same familiar creak of steps at the entrance. She was greeted by Irina Dmitrievna, the very one with her styled hair and serious gaze, who once said, "Lada, smart girl, but be more energetic or no one will notice you." Now she stood with her hands folded at her chest and looked as if she couldn't quite believe it. "You've hardly changed. Only, it's like you grew not upward, but inward." Lada nodded. "Thank you for the invitation. We, of course, put you in the program after the first graders dance and before the veterans performance, but if you'd prefer later, we can do that. Everyone's really looking forward to you. But Lada already knew she wouldn't go on stage. She asked, "Can I just sing in the hallway? The one where it was always quiet before?" The teacher was surprised. "In the hallway, but no one sits there. People will be walking by, talking." "I know, but if someone hears, it will be real." She stood by the wall. The very one where in seventh grade she stood alone, not invited to any club, where she wrote lines in her notebook, hiding from PE, where she looked out the window at the gray yard and dreamed not of a stage, but simply of someone somewhere truly listening. And now she stood at that wall, not as a winner, but as someone who had stayed true to herself. And she began to sing. The first song, without words, just breathe. Just sound that touched the linoleum, the panels, the shelves with folders, the windows. One student walked by and stopped, then another, then came teachers. Even the janitor who once scolded her for wandering the halls leaned against the wall and didn't move. They stood in the hallway as if that was where a concert was always meant to be. No auditorium, no plan, no stage, but something real. Lada sang a second song, one she had written recently, about a girl who went unnoticed, who didn't sing for fame, but to stay herself. In every verse was the breath of that schoolgirl once told, "You're too quiet for the stage." When the song ended, no one clapped, no one spoke. Only one boy with a hearing impairment came up. He was about 10. He didn't speak but gestured to his chest. "Here," his mother translated. He said, "She sounds inside. He doesn't hear you, but he feels you. Always." Lada smiled and sat down beside him right on the floor, placed her hand on his palm, and began to sing again, just for him. In that moment, her voice wasn't audible, but it was alive, and that was, perhaps, the truest concert of her life. After the performance, Irina Dmitrievna came over again, no longer as a teacher. I remembered when you sang at graduation and we turned off the music because we couldn't hear you. We thought, what's the use, quieter than a whisper? But now I understand your strength wasn't in loudness. It was that you never went silent, not once. You just kept sounding in your own way. Lada didn't say anything, just hugged her, silently, because now she knew silence is a language too, as long as there's heart in it. And that evening, walking home down the same road where she once dreamed of disappearing, she felt that even those who can't hear are starting to listen. Because a voice spoken into silence never disappears, it continues to live within those who felt it inside.